Hello and welcome back to another Dare to Game video. Today we are jumping back into a game that I haven't played for quite some time, but that was once a big part of the channel. That game is, of course, Elden Ring, the open-world Souls-like game developed by FromSoftware and released in February of 2022. This game stormed the gaming scene and became by far the best-selling and most popular FromSoftware game of all time, finally pulling the Souls-like genre out of that niche and into the mainstream. At least for about 4 months or so. Any longtime viewers of the channel know that I spent a good half year playing this game constantly and releasing dozens and dozens of videos covering it. But did I love the game? Let's get down to it and revisit Elden Ring in 2024. So let's get one thing clear. Elden Ring was one of the biggest games of 2022 and I really did enjoy it. I think it's an amazing example of AAA open world gaming and really showcases what FromSoft are capable of. I think it is amazing that a Souls-like game finally made it out of the sweaty regions of the ultra-nerd basements and into the living room of average gamers, while still maintaining what a Souls game is. Elden Ring didn't introduce an easy mode. They didn't worry about accessibility. They just did what FromSoft does, which is make a game entirely based on the belief that every person you meet should kill you, sometimes brutally, over and over again until you either cheese them or finally have their exact movement pattern memorized so you can slowly defeat them over the course of several hours. Except, Elden Ring, being an open world game, meant that you could often avoid these enemies, at least if you knew that they were there, or you could just avoid them for a while. The game also offered more in the realm of builds and exploits than any previous Souls game. There is so much freedom in the weapons, armor, and buffs that you can use to make some absolutely insane builds. I specialized in a bunch of one-shot builds when I was making videos for the game, and it was a lot of fun doing so. Then there are the other builds, like the easy mode build where you just spam the meteoric beast claw weapon's special attack and destroy literally any enemy in the game. So I guess you could say the game has an easy mode, you just have to figure it out for yourself. But that's the thing, the game was huge and has a ton of stuff in it. That explains how I was able to make nearly 6 months worth of daily upload content for this game. It is huge. And another thing that Elden Ring is beautiful. The world is absolutely stunning, and this is especially impressive because it isn't photorealistic, but the vistas are hard to compete with. It's also impressive because most of the game is actually quite low resolution. All the character models and item meshes are surprisingly low quality upon a close inspection. That is to say, most people surely don't notice this, but as someone that farmed the game for assets, images, and other stuff to use for my content, I realized that if you look too closely, the pixels really show their age. Now, this is fine for a number of reasons. For one, the performance of the game is fantastic, and so if it is a tech limit that imposes low resolution textures, I can certainly live with it if I can play the game smoothly in full HD 60 frames per second, especially a game this big and this open. The other reason why this is fine, in this case, is that the game generally keeps you too busy to notice. The only reason I noticed is that I spent so much time examining every detail of the game, and so in the end I ended up seeing the cracks. But what are we doing here? I feel like I'm reviewing the game, and I haven't really even discussed the topic of today's video. Well, that topic is fairly simple. At the end of my half-year Elden Ring run, I released my conclusive review for the game. At that time, I had over 250 hours of playtime, and I had completed multiple exhaustive playthroughs, so I was extremely familiar with the game. However, I was suffering from Elden Ring fatigue. I had played it so much that I felt there was nothing left to see, and another issue with gaming content creation is that I rarely get a chance to just play and enjoy a new game. I'm playing it on a mission to figure it out 100% so I can tear it apart and serve it up to people who want to know every detail of whatever specific topic is in question, or how to do something, or where to find something. So between constant recording, keeping detailed notes, and grinding out bosses early so I can progress to find and learn more, games like Elden Ring can be a headache to cover on YouTube. So that's the first source of the Elden Ring fatigue that I was suffering from when I made that review. The second is that the game was getting an insane amount of adulation. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a phenomenal game. Best FromSoft game ever, and I think rather easily in fact. It's also probably the best game of that year, and one of the best games of the generation, I would say. It's a very, very impressive game in pretty much every aspect, and I really did enjoy playing it. at times, especially in my first playthrough, and when I would just get wrapped up in the game and wasn't even thinking about making videos. However, the game is not perfect, not even close. It is not the greatest game of all time, and all games do not need to be Elden Ring. I was so sick of hearing everyone I know online, and the millions I don't know, constantly blowing this game for being the second coming. It is not now, nor was it ever at that level. Now, of course, this is all subjective. For some people out there, I'm sure this game is your absolute favorite, that you would never get sick of it, and if you could only ever play one game again for the rest of your life, you would choose Elden Ring. That is entirely subjective, and so to some people, I'm sure Elden Ring really is the best game of all time. But I am not among those people. A giant part of what I do in my life is play video games. Not just recreationally, although I have been gaming since the late 90s and I've probably wasted way too much of my life doing so, but these days it is a huge part of my life. I've played more games and spent more hours playing those games in the last 5 years of my life since I started this channel than the entire rest of my life before that combined. And that is saying something, as Skyrim released when I was in high school and I spent literally, not figuratively, thousands of hours in that game. And prior to that, I did the same for Grand Theft Auto San Andreas in middle school. And none of that is to consider the hundreds of other games that I played when I managed to escape the depths of San Andreas or later Skyrim. And I play every genre. Sure, my favorites are open world RPGs and action games, but I play them all. Survival, first-person shooters, Souls-like, strategy, platformer, sim, you name it, I play it. So although I don't believe one can be an expert in something like gaming, I am probably as close as a person can be for such a broad interest. And the game is not the greatest of all time. Depending on my mood, I often rate it as either an A or B tier game. But never, not even in my most hype-induced Elden Ring loving hysteria, would I have ever called it, even for a second, an S tier game. So what is the point of this video? I'm not re-reviewing the game. In fact, I think the review I released for it holds up and is very accurate and reflects my feelings pretty accurately, even to this day. I did not have an axe to grind against the game, so I wasn't making shit up to complain about. Everything I praised in that review, I stand by, and every criticism I made, I stand by. The only thing I do not particularly agree with was my overall rating. I am essentially never a contrarian. I don't believe in the practice, as I find contrarians are almost exclusively wrong. They are people who like to argue, and the easiest way to do this is to always pick the side that you know the vast majority of people will disagree with. Now, sometimes contrarians are right, because the mob can be wrong. However, statistically speaking, if there is a vast consensus on a matter, it is usually pretty close to being correct. And when the matter is subjective, like, is a game good, then this rule is especially true. So being a contrarian for any reason other than just wanting to start a fight is typically just something born out of some deep-seated need for attention. All of this being said, and to be fair to the Nico of late July 2022, who reviewed Elden Ring after months of non-stop coverage, I never actually said the game was bad. I just didn't think it was as good as literally everyone was claiming. I think it's a truly phenomenal game, just not a perfect S-tier game that sets a new gold standard. And after having put about another dozen hours into the game since re-downloading it this year, I can say it holds up very well. I think for any of you out there who claimed the game was the best of all time, I challenge you, now that the game has settled down and you may have some distance between it and you, play it again, see how you feel about it. If you are anything like me, I'll bet that you will still enjoy it a lot. You'll be impressed by how beautiful the world is, and you will almost certainly appreciate the huge degree of customization and flexibility that the game offers, and after a while, for me it took a couple hours, you'll even likely get back into the swing of things and enjoy the combat and the huge variety of enemies and bosses in the game. However, you may also start to notice the cracks that the game can't hide. One thing that I didn't go into enough detail about in my review was that one of the issues I have with this game is that it is at its best in the first playthrough. In the first playthrough, this game does pretty much everything right, and it is so much fun to explore the world, never knowing what is around the corner, or what you might have to do to get the thing that you really want. However, on successive playthroughs, when you do know what is around the corner and what comes next, the game feels more like a chore. Souls games are about boss fights, and the challenge of getting through them. However, in Elden Ring, because of the impressive size and scope of the world, you don't actually get to enjoy that challenge like you did in previous Souls games. Sometimes, the slog of just physically getting to the next region can be enough to kill the excitement for me. The game makes progression feel like an absolute chore. And like I said, when all of this is a mystery in your first playthrough, it's not a problem problem at all. You don't know where or what the Palace of Blood is. You haven't heard of the Waterfowl Dance. You don't know the difference between Margit and Morgott. The game has so much to show you, and it couldn't do it any other way than the way that it does. However, as the old saying goes, you can't go home. And Elden Ring teaches that lesson better than any other example I can think of. With other games that I actually consider to be better in pretty much every single way than Elden Ring, games like The Witcher 3, Red Dead Redemption 2, and Kingdom Come Deliverance, if you take a nice long break, you can pick it up and really enjoy the hell out of it on another playthrough. And these aren't particularly sandbox games. They are all story-driven open-world action-adventure games, so each playthrough will be very similar. Now, all of these games have choices, consequences, and varying degrees of branching storylines, but they all always start and end in the same place. The details just switch around a bit. But the overall message here is that in all three of those games, they never get to be a chore. Sure, you might have to do a mission that you dislike or find boring, but the overall experience is great on repeat playthroughs, especially with some time to forget. Elden Ring is not like that because of the game that it is. It's a Souls game, and Souls games are all about the boss fights. That's the thing that you want to do again, not to explore a world you already know and grind enemies that you've already ground, to discover places you've already discovered, and collect weapons that you've already collected. All of that stuff just slows down the thing that you want to do in a Souls game, which is fight insanely powerful, unbalanced bosses that tank damage like a mountain and move with the speed of a pit viper, all while dealing supernova level damage. And so despite it being an open world action adventure RPG-ish game that I really like, for me it is truly a one-time experience, and I've already experienced it. So I wasn't fair in my review. I had played the game 4 times at that point, because I needed to for the content that I was making for YouTube. So I had 1 great, really enjoyable playthrough, and 3 extremely annoying slogs through the world again. So even though the things I said in the video were and are very accurate and do represent my thoughts on the game, my score was too low. I should have been rating the game based off of 1 blind playthrough, as that is the way I recommend playing the game, and that is the average experience most people will have with it. I rated the game a 5.1 out of 10 at the time, and that is only a fair score after playing it as much as I did, as quickly as I did. A more accurate score that I feel will represent the average experience of most Elden Ring players is a fairly solid 7 or maybe even 7.5 out of 10. Like I said, it's a solid A tier game with some aspects that will at times drag it down into the B tier. It is well above average in terms of overall experience, and technically speaking, truly impressive and nothing short of extraordinary. So even though you can't go home, and Elden Ring proves that point beyond a shadow of a doubt for me, you also can't go wrong with Elden Ring, especially if you have never played it before, and you are a fan of grueling video game combat and Souls-like games in general. Thanks for watching another Dare to Game video. If you liked this video, please leave a like and a comment. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you like my content and would like to support this channel, consider becoming a member today for as little as $1.99 a month. It makes a huge difference. But in any case, thanks for watching and have a nice day. I'll see you next time.